paraphrase Roky Erickson, whose lyrics would later be rather fittingly covered by the Swedish heavy metal band Ghost, if you bust ghosts, you have everything. You can bust any ghost you want, and you can do anything you want to do. If you bust ghosts, you have everything. If that intro combined with the title of this video didn't give it away, the original Ghostbusters is one of my favorite films of all time. So, you might naturally think Ghostbusters would spawn at least one video game tie-in due to its status as a cult classic. It has indeed done exactly that not once, not twice, but a whopping 22 times according to Wikipedia. Well, that is if you stretch the term video game tie-in so that it includes a bunch of mobile spin-offs and a couple of pachinko machines. I did briefly play the first Ghostbusters game on the Nintendo Entertainment System, but given that it was much more convoluted and more severely mistranslated than, say, Super Mario Bros. Or Punch-Out!, I never managed to figure out exactly how to get very far in that title. However, that's not the Ghostbusters game I'm here to discuss today. That's probably for the best, as we would most likely be here all day otherwise while I tried to figure out what makes this 1988 version of the game tick. Today's spotlight is centered on the tie-in from 2009, the simply titled Ghostbusters the Video Game. I feel I should clarify that you might see footage from two different versions of the game throughout this video. I started out by recording the original Steam version of it as opposed to the remastered, once Epic Games Store exclusive version that was released in 2019. That's entirely because the Steam version was the one I happened to have on hand and ready to go until I suddenly got over my long-standing hatred of the Epic Store and everything for which it stands. I've got bits of footage from both versions, so it's just a question of whether I can be bothered to include all that footage or if I just end up sticking to the remastered version. I want to briefly address one last thing before we find out whether or not bustin' makes me feel good. I'm classifying this video as at least part of my portion of Phenixx Frights 2022. I know we usually keep that event closer to Halloween than the date I'm planning for this video to air, but Halloween falls on a Monday this year and we don't do Sunday videos anymore, so this is my last chance to get in at least one video in the spirit of the holiday. Now then, let's get down to business to bust all the ghosts. To begin, you might be surprised to find that all four of the titular Ghostbusters in this title are voiced by the actors who originally portrayed them in the first film. That certainly came as a bit of a shock to me, though I can't quite put my finger on why I feel that way. Given that Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray, Ernie Hudson, and the late Harold Ramis are all part of the voice cast, you might reasonably wonder which of them you control within the game. In that case, I'm afraid I have some unfortunate news for you. You don't actually get to play as any of the quartet of professional Spectre exterminators. Instead, you play as a nameless, voiceless fifth Ghostbuster, to whom the original four refer by a variety of slightly condescending nicknames, including Cadet, Junior, and Kid. This is the case because Dr. Peter Venkman, aka Bill Murray, outright forbids you from telling the rest of the team your name. Dr. Venkman attempts to justify this by stating that he, quote, doesn't want to get too attached to this kid. You know, just in case. You'll soon find that this is just the first instance of Dr. Venkman being more than a bit of a jerk to you, but that's beside the point. What does this title's gameplay actually entail, then? Well, most of its gameplay other than basic movement is mouse-controlled. That's because the core mechanics largely consist of holding left-click to fire a ray of energy at your currently targeted ghost and moving the mouse around to make sure that energy beam actually hits the ghost as it flies around. I've forgotten the technical terms the Ghostbusters use for that ray of energy and the effect it has on apparitions, and I honestly can't be bothered to look them up. As an aside, that's odd for me because I normally quite enjoy using technical jargon in contexts like this, but I digress. Essentially, what you need to know is that the longer any ghost is subjected to that stream of energy, the weaker the ghost becomes. Think of it as draining their health meter in a sense. That's basically what it is. You can even see something resembling a health meter on each ghost you target. Once a Spectre is weak enough, you can switch to using what's called your capture stream and begin pulling your target toward a containment trap that you or one of the other Ghostbusters will have to strategically place in the area before you can apprehend said apparition. Your proton pack, the nuclear-powered death trap waiting to happen that you wear like a backpack, may automatically switch to your capture stream for you if a ghost's health is low enough. When a ghost is close enough to a trap, it'll start getting sucked down toward the containment unit. When this happens, you need to make sure the Spectre doesn't escape the trap's suction by moving your mouse in the opposite direction that the nearly captured ghost is attempting to move. To help speed this process up and temporarily daze any ghosts you've caught in your capture stream, you can periodically press your right mouse button to slam them into the ground or any nearby walls. Once the ghost has been fully contained in the trap, you're expected to retrieve the unit by walking up to it and pressing E. Whenever you're just looking for ghosts instead of fighting to capture them, you can employ the use of something called your PKE meter by pressing X. This is essentially just a Ghostbusters version of detective mode from the Batman Arkham games. Based on what this meter displays, you'll pretty much always know whether or not you're headed in the right direction and or near any hidden specters. If it's intensely flashing green, you're near a ghost that isn't hidden. The meter's display will turn red if a spirit is attempting to conceal itself nearby. Your proton pack also displays your health meter, though not as prominently as I would prefer. You don't automatically reach a game over should your health meter be fully depleted, so long as there's at least one fellow Ghostbuster still standing who can revive you. If this is not the case, whether because you're separated from your comrades when you're downed, or because everyone else has also been rendered out of commission, that's when you'll fail and have to restart from a checkpoint. That's basically everything you'll need to know to get by in Ghostbusters the video game. With all that explained, now I can start discussing more of my actual thoughts on this title. For once, I've actually got a fair amount to complain about, and I'm genuinely relishing the opportunity to do so. There's honestly not a lot I like about this game, much to my disappointment. For starters, it's a game based on a film that I personally find hilarious, and yet I think most of the tie-in game's humor is either flat and dry at best, or awkward and downright unsettling at worst. Most of Peter Venkman's jokes revolve around him either being a creep toward any women in his immediate vicinity.
Well, hello. You're perfectly safe now, Miss. The Ghostbusters are here.
Back off, loser. Never gonna happen.
That approach rarely works with me. I'll show you why later.
Or a condescending jerk to you for no readily discernible reason, which doesn't sit well with me for various reasons. I would ask how it's possible to so severely screw up the humor in a Ghostbusters game that even features the original voice cast, but considering the general public response to the various reboots of the film franchise that have come forth since this game was first released, I guess it's not that difficult to do. Admittedly, there were a few lines here and there that got a laugh out of me, but given the circumstances, I was equally surprised and disappointed that these were so few and far between. Secondly, the levels are all fairly linear and start to feel increasingly samey the more you play. It feels to me like no matter how far you are in the game, you'll perpetually have to battle and capture several lesser apparitions before eventually tracking down and trapping the level's big baddie. There's not much of a sense of accomplishment or payoff from doing that as far as I'm concerned. It's a lot of the same tedious gameplay mechanics that just happen to take place in a few different indoor locales, like certain parts of a high-class hotel or a public library. Thirdly, it seems to me that the game's AI won't exactly be besting IBM's Watson on any future episodes of Jeopardy, if you catch my drift. Though it appears that the AI-controlled Ghostbusters are at least trying their best, their most concerted efforts are far from good enough in my experience. It feels like I have to do the vast majority of the heavy lifting while fighting and trapping any ghosts. Furthermore, I don't think my comrades appropriately prioritize reviving each other when anyone is knocked out of the fray, especially when that happens to me. I always have to go out of my way to hurry and revive them, while they take their sweet time getting around to helping me or anyone else up. That's why I eventually stopped playing altogether at one point. I kept failing the mission because everyone else would somehow get themselves knocked unconscious while I was already down, so I couldn't do anything about it. Honestly, Ghostbusters the video game is a pretty significant letdown in my mind. I wonder if it's even possible at this point for the film franchise to spawn any tie-in video games that are actually worth playing. I mean, it's had 22 attempts by this point, and we're all aware of the oft-quoted definition of insanity. If I want to have a much better experience in a game about catching ghosts, I may as well just go play Luigi's Mansion. Hell, maybe I'll cover that next Halloween if Nintendo's lawyers don't catch wind of this and preemptively copyright strike the thought out of my mind.
Now, when the center bar peaks, you're headed in the right direction. When it's flat, you're following a cold trail.